Hello, and welcome to the Boffin Buzz, the podcast for anyone fascinated by farming's future. Well, hello, and welcome again to another episode of the Boffin Buzz. And we are talking farming, sustainability, and profitability, and everything that goes with it today with my special guest, who is Andrew Pitts, who farms at the Grange, Mears Ashby, Northamptonshire. Andrew, good afternoon. How are you?
Very well, Tom. Thank you. Very well.
Fantastic.
Sitting in a windy field in Northamptonshire.
Yes,
I'm hoping it keeps up and we don't break down with lack of 4G.
Yeah, no, well, you're very bravely coming, as you say, over the mobile. You're actually sitting in one of your fields that you're doing a trial in, I understand. Is that right?
Yeah, this is the one with the comparing a pulse as a break crop to oats.
Yeah.
See what residual we get and how that works and how we can reduce inputs after the pulse crop, whereas we may not.
Well, we'll come to that in a bit, Andrew, and I certainly want to talk to you about that because it's really exciting trials that we've got going on there. But first of all, I want to ask you if there were three things that you're looking to change within farming, or set about changing, or already are changing, perhaps. What would they be?
Well, first thing that needs changing is definitely tech. Farming tech is both brilliant and intensely frustrating at the same time. For example, just now I had to download an app so that I could talk to you in a field, and it took nearly 20 minutes to download the app. And I was sitting here thinking, rude words as to why can't the government sort out mobile connectivity. That's a big bugbear in rural business. There's lots of good tech in farming, though, isn't there? There's tons of good stuff that makes it better. Second thing is really is a challenge for us is sustainability, making certain that we are more, our businesses are more robust. They can cope with change. They can cope with the very, very dodgy weather we're getting now.
Yeah,
that's a real thing, and building resilience into the soil. So the resilience and sustainability are really number 2 and 3, but they're both rolled into one, I'd say.
No, absolutely. No, very worthy aims. And I know that you've done a lot of work around all three of those areas, which we'll talk about in a minute. But first of all, I want to ask you, Andrew, what's your, I'd like to sort of understand your background. How did you get into farming? Was farming always going to be there?
Not. My father was a townie who wanted to be a farmer, and he started farming his own right years ago when I was born. But me, no, I very nearly joined the RAF.
Right.
Unfortunately, by the time I'd made my mind up that I wanted to fly, I was nearly 24, and pilot training stopped at 23, so I never got to fly. So farming has always been a passion anyway, and I've dived into it with both feet.
Right, absolutely. And you farm in Northamptonshire. Tell us a little bit about the farm there.
Okay, well, so Dad started with a tenancy of 240 acres in the mid-60s. When he died 9 years ago, we were farming just over 2,000 acres. It was originally a mixed farm. We sold the cows in 2002, by which time we had 220 of the highest genetic worth cows in the country.
Right.
We were doing embryo transplants, so science was heavily involved even in the cows. But once the cows went, I specialised in seed production, and we've become very specialised in that. And almost everything we grow is for seed, and what little doesn't go to seed goes into Camgrain as milling wheat, and I was the founding director of Camgrain Northampton.
Right. Can I ask you, Andrew, why? Because you farm with your brother, I think. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Why did you decide to get out of dairy then?
Everybody was making money out of our milk, other than us.
Right.
Simple. I actually did the Worshipful Company of Farmers course in 1998, and that made me change the way I ran the business. And in 2012, I did the Institute of Ag Management Leadership Program, and that changed me as a person. So they're brilliant, brilliant courses, but I costed everything out much harder than I had done. realised that we were losing about 2 pence a litre of milk produced, and when you're producing 2 million litres of milk a year, that's suddenly a lot of money.
No, absolutely.
As Dad said, any asset kept too long can become a liability.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, because as you just highlighted, the technology that you're bringing on in your herd, I should think that was probably pretty cutting edge, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. Yeah, there were, I think, in the sort of 99, 2000, 2001, there would have only been a handful of farms doing embryo transplant.
Yeah.
Probably only 3 using embryos from their own stock rather than from foundation stock. So, yeah, I've always been interested in technology because it still means you're effectively going backwards. We've got to change. Everything changes around.
That leads us nicely into our first area. I mean, technology, like it or loathe it, or it's a bit Marmite, I suppose, isn't it? But the interesting thing is that much as you rail against technology, Andrew, you have always been at the forefront of it, and you touched briefly on the fact that you're a seed grower. Would you like to just sort of give us a bit more of a sort of background on that? Why did you go into seed? What have you been, what have you been trying to develop in that sort of technology on your farm?
Seed growing started because we rent a lot of land and needed to pay the rent, and getting a premium. It seemed a logical thing, but as I got more involved in breeding, you sort of get more interested in it. It draws you in as you find something. When I did my basis exams in 2003 or 4, probably 2004, that was at PBI Cambridge, which is now RAGP.
Yeah.
And I'm, people there, and started working more closely with those. And we've got in the ground now an astonishing variety. We've got a variety of wheat called Goldfinch, which we're multiplying seed for. Last year it was 2 hectares of seed, so fresh out of the greenhouse really, and that produced 22 tons of seed, so a tremendous yield. And 5 farmers around the country are multiplying that up. The good thing about Goldfinch is it's a bread making wheat.
Yep.
It has orange blossom midge resistance, but it also, most importantly, it's the first bread making wheat with barley yellow dwarf virus resistance.
Ah, yes.
So I'm really interested in this. It looks fantastic at the moment. That would enable a farmer to guarantee, with its orange blossom midge resistance and its BYDV resistance, guarantee a farmer could sign up to the insecticide-free option at 45 quid a hectare in the SFI. So, I mean, that's a huge step forwards, because previously there's not been a quality wheat with that genetics in there.
Yeah, it is actually. I mean, that's one story that I've followed myself. The BYDV. I mean, it's an extraordinary tale, because this is technology that came in. Gosh, it was over 20 years ago. I think they first discovered the gene, and it's taken that long to bring it through. And if you think about, when they first discovered it, that was before neonics even came in, let alone went out again. And this was, so the astonishing thing about this is that they carried on developing that gene and that trait, even though neonics came in, and there was no need for it with neonics. Everyone said, what on earth do you need a BYDV resistant variety for? If we've got neonics that you can just put on the grain, and that'll keep it protected through the vulnerable period anyway. And of course, they stuck with it, as we know, and the trait has now been introduced. It was Wolverine, I think, was the first variety that had it in.
Yeah, Wolverine, a year or 2 ago, and now we've got, because it yielded so very well in its, first decent sized plot in a field at 2 hectares. 22 tons of seed rather from 2 hectares, clean seed, not just
that's very good.
Weight. So yeah,
good quality too.
Yeah, it's high Hagberg, high specific weight. Protein's very much up there. We've got 40 hectares of it, so very hopeful at 400 plus tons. And we will be supplying several lorryfuls to the various millers to give them full lorryful tests. So it would be lovely if it came out as a Group 1. No one can say it's a Group 1 or a Group 2 or a Group 3 or a Group 4 because it hasn't been through the tests. But, it's got milling potential.
Yeah.
And if we end up with that, that's nearly the holy grail, isn't it?
It is. Well,
all we need is it to have some kind of allelopathy that stops blackgrass germinating, and it would be that.
Well, but I haven't heard of anything like that. But there is another project that I know that you're involved in, and I wanted to talk about, and that is slug-resistant wheat. Because
wouldn't that be a good thing? Wouldn't it be lovely to plant your wheat and not have to keep looking for slugs all the while?
Exactly.
Not around on a quad bike, freezing your balls off, trying to kill slugs and what have you.
Well, now as you know, the quest is underway for a genetic trait for that, and you joined that quest, Andrew. So just to remind listeners of the story here. So this is one of the Watkins lines. These are ancient varieties that were collected over 100 years ago by a chap called Watkins. His family, when he died, left the collection to science. They've been looking through the genetics for interesting traits. And there was this one line, Watkins 788, that they discovered in feeding trials in the lab at John Innes Centre, that it was consistently spurned by slugs. And so they put it through some limited field trials, but and it did look as though that was coming out in the trials. But what they said was the problem is what we really need to do is put it in proper commercial fields, see how it performs in a farmer's field to know for sure. That's when Boffin got to hear about it, and we put the idea out to farmers. And Andrew, you were one of the first farmers who came forward and said, "Yup, love it. Let's have it on the farm." Now, at the time, I don't know if you remember, but at the time, you said, "When can we have the seed?" And they said, "Oh, we've only got 42 grams of seed." But on the strength of your keenness for this, and also a number of other farmers, they multiplied it up over 2 years, and we put the first trial in. It was autumn 2022, I think, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah. That trial plot is about 200 yards from where I sit.
Is that right?
Yeah. The first week after rape and sluggy.
How's your Watkins 788 looking, by the way? Because we've got
Watkins 788 and we've got the Blackman variety as well, which also have that. The Blackman is standing beautifully. The Watkin was 5 foot tall before the deluge that we had. Yesterday we had 34 mil of rain in 24 hours, and now it's a little bit more horizontal than vertical, because even though it's had a full dose of straw shortener, it was the untreated bit. The straw shortener was about 5'6" tall, and the treated was about 4'6" tall. So it responds really well to straw shorteners, but it's definitely breeding material, not commercial material.
There, and that's
hasn't been nibbled by the slugs. And the slug traps we put out there, we were regularly seeing, underneath an 8-inch slug trap, regularly seeing 10 or 15 slugs under there.
Right.
And they just chose not to eat that wheat. So it's definitely got something in it.
Well,
that's really what they're extracting and using into modern varieties to get yield and standing power.
Well, I can tell you, Andrew, and I think if you remember from the workshop we had, so Keith Walters, Professor Keith Walters at Harper Adams University, has been delving through the science. So we've had 10 farmers. Well, we should have had 10 farmers. Unfortunately, we didn't get any data from 2 of them, one of them being my farm, which I didn't actually manage to plant, unfortunately, in this year. But Keith received enough data to go through it and to get some statistically relevant results from it. And yes, sure enough, he's found that there is something about that wheat that does seem to spurn slugs, that the data is coming through, and there is something about it that seems to spurn it. I mean, this is by no means a silver bullet, and also it's very much the beginning of the journey, because as you say, Andrew, it's an interesting research variety, but as a commercial variety, there's an absolute no-hoper. You wouldn't want it in your fields. It's I think the yield you got off it last year was something like 3.5 tons a hectare.
Pretty low. It would make a great thatching straw.
Yes.
But that's about it. But as genetic material, it's probably something. It's a gold mine, and with the technology that we're now going to get hold of at some point. I don't know how long it is before we see it on farm. When they can identify what gene it is in there that the slugs don't like.
Well, that is another part of the project that they're looking at, so what they've done is they've crossed it with Paragon, which is a more modern wheat, and they've got 84 of what they call rills, which are recombinant inbred lines, and now they've been testing these in the trials at John Innes Centre. We've been asking people, if you remember, we've been asking people to send in slugs for feeding trials. We've actually had over 2,000 slugs sent in now, and that's enabled them.
Meters worth of slugs this autumn, then.
Yes, that's right. So they've been testing all of these lines, these rills, as I say, and they've identified. There's a range of them that they've tested. Well, there's one, line 64, which is even better than Watkins. Really, really exciting.
Okay.
And then there's one, line 50, which is right at the other end of the spectrum. So it's super palatable to slugs. And now those are the two that we're multiplying up at the moment, and we're going to be bringing out onto farm trials this autumn. So I hope you're going to help us with that trial, Andrew.
Yeah, not keen on the idea of that line 50, though. I don't really think I want to get anything more to eat, unless it's a diversionary feeding technique.
Well, no, the idea of this is just to get an idea of the spectrum here. So if we have one really good one and one really bad one, then hopefully the data will show the differences, and it will also help the scientists understand the nature of this trait.
It does sound like a slight, if line 50 is really palatable, multiplying seed, not that we're going to want it, would be very difficult indeed.
Well, now the other aspect of this, and I think it could be an interesting one, is that what about if you had we're also, as part of this project, so this project is Slimers, so strategies leading to improved management and enhanced resilience against slugs. It's a 3-year DEFRA-funded project. We've got 5 industry partners on this, as well as Boffins leading it. Now, the other aspect of what we're looking at is patch location. And again, Keith Walters, this is work that he's done over the years to apparently slugs gather in patches. And you can tell from the actual soil characteristics where those patches are going to be. So just going back to the line 50 again, this is where I think it's going to be really interesting, Andrew, because what we could do is say, you drill your field with your variety, your goldfinch or whatever it is. And then in the patches where you're going to get slugs, you drill some extra line 50, not necessarily line 50 because it's probably in the wrong background at the moment, but that same trait that's got this super palatable trait, you put in there as a sacrificial crop. Well, it could be the line 50 bats, but you know that the slugs are going to eat that, and they're not going to touch your goldfinch. Is the theory? Do you think that would work?
I think it might work. I think I'd rather, if I've got to buy seed, why would I not just look after my the line 60, whatever it was.
Line 64. Yeah.
Yeah. Plant that because that's a scientific experiment that has absolutely no interest to most farmers, I would think, because you would rather double roll the field and monitor it for slugs than you would put something there that would cause the slug to feed, to multiply, to produce more offspring, because that has a massive potential downside. If you've got a pet, you don't feed it, you deter it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Well, let's see where this goes. I mean, obviously, we're right at the going back to the BYDV resistant wheat. We're right at the beginning of the story of the slug resistant wheat here, I think, aren't we? But what's really exciting is that we're involved as farmers, and it's really exciting to be at the start of this journey. Just to sort of fill you in as well on the science. So the idea behind these 84 rills is that they get this spectrum of analysis of how these wheats perform under pressure from slugs. And it's that can help them zero in on the specific trait that's coming into play here, and they don't know what that trait is at the moment. Whether it's a physiological thing, whether it's just that the wheat is growing away from it, or whether there is actually some sort of toxic element or something, an element that slugs don't find particularly palatable. That's the work that they're doing in the lab at the moment. The work that we're doing in the field is helping them zero in on that trait, which I think is really, really exciting. So we're some way off A, finding the trait, and B, we've then got to get it into a good modern variety, I suppose. But it is. I mean, I don't know about you, Andrew, but I find this area really fascinating. Now, I know that you've been doing quite a lot of work on your farm. You are a Helix technology farm, I believe. Isn't that right?
Yeah, we're Helix National. We were the first of the Helix, Hutchinson's Helix farms. I think because I'm naturally a technophobe, technology, when it works, is blooming wonderful. But more often than not, it has all sorts of various problems. But I was drawn to that project because the Hutchinson's Omnia platform is designed to talk to everybody else's platform. That's been one of the failings of farm software is that it only talks to one thing. It's like go back a few years and John Deere technology would only talk to John Deere machines, and that's no bloody good because nobody in the world is just John Deere or just New Holland or just Fendt or just Claas, and nothing. So that's what drew me towards it. And eventually it will make life easier. But I seem to think that that's probably a job I'm going to delegate to. I want to see the information. I can't be asked to put all the data into it. Yeah. So when the data goes automatically, that's much better.
Yes.
So, yes. But the chance to try new tech, and if it works, we get the benefit. And if it fails, somebody else pays for it. That's every farmer's dream, isn't it?
Well, I get
what does work and what doesn't. And one of the things that's been a fabulous result has been the Hillcourt Farm Services nitrogen prediction test for milling wheat.
Right.
We had to take a plant at sort of in about another 3 or 4 weeks' time, send it off, and get told what sort of nitrogen your wheat is likely to produce in a milling situation is really valuable because you can then decide, hey, do I spend money on late season nitrogen? Am I going to get it without it, etc. And that's really accurate, really reliable. That's tech that we use every year on the ground where we grow milling wheat. And that's a classic example of how tech can really make a difference. And this year, milling wheat could be 50, 60 pounds a tonne premium again. And a decent crop of wheat, that's 500 or 600 quid worth of premium.
Yep.
That's really good money, isn't it?
But let me ask you. So that milling wheat reading from Hillcourt Farm, is that something that's come through from your involvement with Helix?
Yes, I think it's freely available. Anyone can use it. And farm services are very well respected laboratories. But we first found that 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It's one of the technologies that I wouldn't be without now.
Now I know that they're sorry.
Well, yeah. Last year before, when we were paying 600 and something quid a tonne for fertiliser, £2 a kilo.
Yeah.
If you could stake 40 kilos, that 80 quid a hectare is well worth having, isn't it?
Well, there are quite a few interesting technologies that they're trialing, I think, as part of the Helix program. Is there any and as you said, what's lovely when you got it on your own farm is that you can actually sort of see it firsthand. Is there any technology that you've seen through the Helix program that you think, wow, this is really exciting? I really want this on my farm, or perhaps you're already developing it on your farm.
There are several things that we've come across to say that Hillcourt one is an absolute no-brainer every year. There have been all sorts of various, I call them nutrient losses, things that you add that will enhance the nitrogen uptake or make it more resilient. But the thing I would like to see more, and I think it's more plant breeding now, is great. The biggest yield robber on our farm by far is never disease. It's always the rainfall we have in May and June to finish a crop off. So greater drought resilience is a trait I'd like to see more in plants. That's really valuable because with modern ag chem and good disease characteristics, look at X-Days, for example, that's really high yielding without fungicide. They're really good, but it's that lack of rainfall in May or June that we could get. I mean, we've just had the wettest 18 months ever. At some point, it's not raining, so that resilience. So, we've done various things. We're ongoing with how to get more carbon into soils, because every 1% of carbon you can add to your soils is equivalent of an inch of rain absorbed. An inch of rain is a week's worth of growing in May and June when you've got a full canopy of wheat uses an inch of water a week. Now, if we can capture that, hold that by thinking about how we manage our soils, how we make them better able to hold the water that comes and help it to dissipate when it's a deluge like we've had. That's really important. So if we can work out how we can make our soils more resilient, then that not only allows us to cope with the huge variation in rainfall and heat that we get, it also means we produce more wheat and produce better quality whatever crop it is. And that's basically money in the bank, isn't it?
Yeah. So, what do you think, Andrew? We kind of jumped to number 3 on your priority list here: resilience. I guess. And do you think? Plant breeding. We were talking about just a minute ago. Do you think plant breeding has a role here? Perhaps it has the pivotal role here, or is it?
Yeah, and I very much think that we are on the cusp of gene editing. I think that as different traits are identified and able to be moved into modern high-yielding varieties to enhance them, I can't see any downside in that. I was always slightly nervous with genetic modification because my view is in this field is very much, if it can be done in nature and we're just speeding it up, that's absolutely fine. If we're taking a salmon gene and putting it in a strawberry so we can freeze it and it doesn't turn to mush, well, that doesn't strike me as being quite right. But if something that can happen naturally in plant breeding is, instead of taking 20 crosses and 20 years work, if it can be done in 3 years, that's a massive plus. If we can get more nutritious food or lower input food without relying on artificial fertilizers and other inputs, that's only good for the environment. It's only good for the customer, and everybody wins. That I think is a terrific thing to look forward to receiving. I hope that happens sooner rather than later.
Well, I could have some news for you on that one, Andrew, in that so at Boffin, we know that a lot of our membership, including yourself, have been very interested in gene-edited crops. We've been following the fortunes of various research institutes, primarily Rothamsted and John Innes Centre, and how far they're getting with getting gene-edited crops to the stage at which they could come onto commercial farms. Now, with the passing of the bill last year, the Genetic Technologies Bill, we can now bring those crops onto commercial farms. So we've gone to John Innes Centre and Rothamsted and said, what have you got that you can bring out? There's 3 very, very exciting crops. I mean, well, I say very exciting crops. They are the first 3 that could be coming out onto commercial farm across the whole of Europe. We're just coming to an agreement with Rothamsted and John Innes Centre to multiply up enough to bring onto our farms. It'll probably be in a couple of years' time. So one of them is a wheat that is the background is cadenza, and it's a low asparagine wheat. So asparagine turns into acrylamide when it's heated at high temperature, which of course is a carcinogen. The aim here is to have the thing is that there are limits that are coming in on acrylamide now. There are benchmark limits, advisory limits, but they're going to become legal, I understand, shortly. The way processors, food manufacturers get around it at the moment is that they put in additives or they process it more in order to get rid of the problem. But of course, the opportunity here is it's something that's locked into the genetics. That is a low asparagine, which means low acrylamide, which means they don't have to process it a lot. And of course, there's all this worry about ultra processed food. So it is going to be healthier wheat, is the idea. But we won't know for sure until we've actually processed it, made it into breakfast cereal and biscuits and so on, and actually seen what the result is. So hopefully that's something that we will be doing with our growers in a couple of years' time, which I think will be very exciting.
So it's not necessarily an agricultural trait that benefits, but it's customer benefiting. That's very good. And it sounds like a classic example of a premium paying variety.
Well, that is the interesting thing, you see, Andrew, that so this is Professor Nigel Holford at Rothamsted, who's developed this over years, developed this trait. And he's actually had difficulty getting breeders interested in it, plant breeders interested in it, for this very reason that, the plant breeder turns around and says, well, why would any of my farmers want to grow this, want to pay us a premium for developing this trait? And the food manufacturers are saying, well, this all sounds very good, but I'm not going to commit to a premium until I've actually seen it perform. So it's this chicken and egg situation that we're at with this. And so that's why we're hoping to bring forward a sort of experimental batch, if you like, so that we can have a look at it.
It's always the case that getting a premium out of an end user is very difficult indeed. They want the trait, but they won't pay for it. And that is going to have to change.
Yeah.
And the best thing to do with this would be to, if there is such a variety, that it all wants marketing through one group. So the power lies with the marketing group, not the consumer. And that would be a really good way of building it, making it sustainable, making it a resilient variety, and building a real premium and giving value to the customer as well. Because it's not going to be as high yielding. It's based on cadenza. It's going to be 10% behind a commercial variety at least.
This is the thing, Andrew, and I hope this is what we're going to learn from the technology. That the thing is, because they have just because they've got this trait in cadenza doesn't mean it has to stay in cadenza. And also, with the advantage of gene editing, is because they know exactly where the genes are. They know exactly how to change it. They can bring the same trait into a modern variety through the same gene editing technology. Now, they don't have to do that. They could take the cadenza, they could cross it naturally with another line and so on. Of course, it would still be gene edited, but it would be bred more traditionally into another line. The difficulty there is that you'd be bringing in all the other traits from the cadenza as well. Like low yield.
If gene editing is that good, Tom, surely it's just picking out the one bit that they want without bringing in. I didn't ever grow cadenza, but it was, it's an old variety, isn't it? And it would have had a weakness with, let's say, it was yellow rust or septoria or something. But that could be put into a variety. And if it's biscuits, a biscuit wheat or something, why not put it into Bomford, which is going to be the highest yielding wheat out there, Bamford rather, and do it properly. Then you've got the Holy Grail again, haven't you?
Absolutely. Well, therein lies a tale, Andrew, and I shall tell you more about that in time, I hope. One of the other varieties that we've identified, by the way, is from John Innocenter. This is Cristobal Wowie and his team there. And they've, you may have heard about the bigger, bolder grain that they've developed. So they've found the trait that limits grain size, and they've edited this. And so you get a bigger grain. Now, just because it's a bigger grain, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a higher yield. But the opportunity here is to tweak the agronomy so that we can see how this performs. We're talking about potentially something that could be physiologically very, very different from the wheats that we're growing at the moment. I mean, apparently, according to Cristobal, there's definitely a quality advantage in this wheat. It's higher protein.
There'd be a higher extraction rate of flour as well, wouldn't you?
Yes, that's definitely the case. But it's not necessarily going to appeal unless it's a higher yield. But I think it's just a question of, we're talking about a different sink and a different source or whatever it is here. It's just about getting the agronomy right. So I think that would be a really interesting line to bring out onto a commercial farm.
So that's got boffin written all over it, Tom, hasn't it? I can hear you thinking it now.
Yeah. Well, then, anyway, listen, look out for those, because obviously we got to multiply up these varieties first. And so, we're right back at the beginning of our journey on this one, like we were with slug resistant wheat back in 2020 when we
Yeah.
first came across it. So look out for these things. I think there's going to be obviously the extra excitement here is it's gene edited crops. This is a whole new technology. It's not just a new trait.
The brilliant thing about gene editing is that the Europeans have decided to accept it too, which means the big breeders, KWS, RAGT, Nixon's and what have you, they will all start Syngenta too. They'll all start working not just in the background, but in the foreground on this. So that there was always the potential, if it was only a UK thing, big breeders wouldn't embrace it because they couldn't sell the seed anywhere other than the UK. Now it looks like it can be, certainly throughout Europe and most likely throughout the world, which opens up new markets for them. And that should help speed it up as well.
Well, I hope so. I mean, the thing is, one thing I'm conscious of, certainly within the Boffin membership, is there are, growers like yourself, Andrew, who are really keen for this technology. There are also a lot of growers who are very concerned about it, the implications for IP, for example, how it's going to tie farmers to, hybrid technology, for example, and things like that.
Hybrid tech has been embraced by, hybrid barley is just, that's completely normal now, isn't it? We grow hybrid rye as a seed crop where you plant the male and the female. And that's sort of, as long as you don't end up being forced down the route that, one or two people have tried where you have to buy all your agronomy from the same seed house, what have you, that doesn't appeal to me at all. I would resist that because that's being told how you're going to grow it. Fine if it's the best product for that variety, but if it just happens to be their only product that fits that particular species of plant, no thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these are all things that I think would need to be explored. And the important thing is that farmers should be part of that equation, and all farmers, well, not all farmers, but a good cross section of farmers, so that we can really understand, the implications of this technology, what it means for us, what the benefits are for us, what the benefits are for the consumer and for society, and so on, but also what the potential downsides are. And I think, by working together, I do strongly believe that farmers should be at the centre of this journey. Really, so it's something that I'm really looking forward to in the future, and I'm quite open to that there could be some unknowns about this technology that we will discover, and we must keep our eyes open to that. And it could change the direction, and we should be open to that and understand it and want to embrace it. I don't know. I mean, what are your feelings? Because you're, as I say, you're quite an advocate for this technology, Andrew. But what would you say to those people who think that we shouldn't be going down this road at all?
I'd hesitate to use the word Luddite, but the problem we have in this world is that there are 8 billion people. There is clearly going to be less and less land available to feed those 8 billion people. And the scientific revolutions, be it, Norman Borlaug or the Haber-Bosch process or whatever, those breakthroughs have enabled the population to go as it is. And if we're to produce more food with less impact than we've ever had before, and to reverse the decline in the species that are disappearing, birds, insects, butterflies, etc., we're going to need all the help science can give us. Now, we've proved that on our own farm, where we've got huge numbers of birds, lots of, we've embraced environmental management. We consult on it. It's a really good diversification for us, both, consulting on that subject and getting involved in SFI now, stewardship before. There's a space for everything, but the less ground that we actually produce food on, it puts more pressure on that ground. So there are fewer acres of ground growing food crops. They've got to be highly productive, but they've also got to be productive in a way that doesn't detract from the soil, from the air, from the environment. And that's really important. And our farmers evolved from a plough-based system 20 years ago through to a big cultivator behind a Caterpillar tractor to getting rid of the Caterpillar and the cultivator and evolving into a direct drilling farm. We are effectively what is now called regen, but it's evolved because it actually is the best practice to manage our soils to bring resilience into our business. As I said, the more carbon you get in the soil, the more water you can store. Therefore, the more yield you get in a dry year. The more easy the roots penetrate the soil. They go down the wormholes a couple of meters down, and 2 meters down, it's generally a bit of moisture down there. So we've evolved. I haven't ever woken up one morning and thought, today I'm going to be a regen farmer. It's just been a case of, this works. This is something that we can try. We can make it fit our system. We can evolve, and we can use less nitrogen to produce more crops. We can use fewer herbicides. We can use less fungicide. Insecticides are almost unheard of on our farm now. We'd only plan to use insecticides, or only expect to. We'd never plan to. We'd expect to have to use insecticides on barley and on peas, because BYDV in barley is always going to be a major problem. We did a tramline trial last year where we didn't put any insecticide on, and that was a 5 ton a hectare disaster.
Oh no!
We lost 5 tons a hectare to BYDV in a strip trial last year, and we know that with peas, P nation virus is going to clobber you, absolutely clobber you. So you have to expect certain crops there. So what you do in the rotation is you build greater resilience. You make certain you don't use any insecticides anywhere else. So that's on about 12 to 15% of the farm. And as we can find better ways of managing the farm, we hope to reduce that altogether. So that's great for wildlife too.
Yeah. Well, now talking of wildlife, and you touched on it earlier, the environmental work that you and your brother have done on the farm, and I mean that has had more impact than just within your farm, mainly because of so you're involved as a BASF sustainability farm, I think, as well. So just tell us, a bit about how that came about. What you've been aiming to achieve with that, and what sort of successes you've had as well.
That came about because I got thoroughly pissed off with NGOs saying, this was in the early noughties. There's lots of noise about we had to give up huge amounts of land for the environment, and it was the only way you could possibly reverse the decline. And William and I got really quite fed up with people who really didn't know what they were talking about, trying to tell farmers how to do it. And I've never been good at being told what to do by someone who doesn't know what they're talking about or doesn't know how to do it. So we set out how to prove them wrong. And after about 4 or 5 years, so this would have been 2003, 4, 5, 6, we'd started to have some serious successes at building bird numbers and insect numbers. And we were approached in
How are you? Sorry to interrupt. How are you going about it?
Very easily. We put the same attention to detail in the environmental crops, and the same amount of detail and attention to absolute detail in environmental crops as conventional crops. So instead of trying to grow 5 tons an acre of wheat, you'd be looking at growing 200 skylarks or something, and you just have to find what do they need and provide it. And it was not difficult. So we had very, very good focus on the middle of the field for crop production, the outside the field for environmental management. And the numbers came very quickly. Nature is fabulous. If you give it what it needs, it will find it and repopulate it. And in 2008, BASF were looking for a farm close to London, to the opinion makers. So we're 45 minutes by train from London. And it's become an interesting partnership where we do trial work for them on environmental matters and commercial work with them on varieties and ag chem, but mostly that's evolved now into soil management, work on how to make soils more resilient and cover crops, how they blend in and tie the whole lot together, because everybody's doing trials on little bits. It's the holistic farm management that is what we specialize in. And that's where the successes come, because it hasn't just been, we're going to grow 5 tons an acre of wheat. We want to break that 12 tons across. That's really quite easy to do in the middle of a field. But if we want to produce vast amounts of songbirds, then you have to have all the infrastructure. Songbirds are a really good indicator of the health of a farm, because unless you've got the insects and the habitat behind it, then the numbers won't be there. So that was a really good thing, and we've influenced government policy 2 or 3 times on the data generated on this farm. But it builds.
Just tell me. Well, first of all, you touched on the numbers. Could you give me an illustration of how you've improved the numbers?
Okay, an easy one would be yellowhammers. Yellowhammers, particularly in the winter, like grain. We had some data sponsored by BASF. They cost a bloody fortune. We had a man turn up for 3 days every fortnight, monitoring bird numbers over a substantial period of years. And by growing the right crops for them, or the right environmental crops, and supplementary feeding, we had numbers of, we started off with about 100 and something yellowhammers on the farm, and in the winter months now we're regularly counting over 1,000, to tenfold increase, because we're giving them everything they need. It's not difficult, and the data which pushed Jim Pace to making the decision to allow supplementary feeding in an environmental stewardship scheme, and that's just been now announced in SFI for 2024-5, was the thing that tipped the edge. Was not the work that the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust had been done and other people had, but our data on a meeting and he was present at on this farm said, right, we need to do this. That's going to make it happen. So it was that was the straw that broke the back of the people against allowing farmers to supplementary feed. So that's the sort of thing that we've done in the past and continue to do so. But too many people have a view that farmers spray everything, they want to kill everything, they don't look after they don't steward the land. And I think actually Mr. Clarkson should take some credit here, because he's shown the public the real side of farming. And I've never met Jeremy Clarkson, I probably never will, but he's shown people the good and the bad of farming, and the environmental stuff as well he's touched upon. It's really important we do both really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But now I noticed the time we've been rattling on, and we haven't yet talked about the very crop that you're sitting in, which are the peas and the oats. Now, so you're taking part. You are one of our
I will walk across. I've got 10% battery power left, Tom. So this is going to have to be brief. I will walk out of the car across.
As you're walking across, I'm going to introduce the. So this is a trial that we're doing. This is with PGRO. It's a £5.9 million DEFRA-funded project led by PGRO. We, as Boffin, are in farm trials. Andrew is one of our Pulse pioneers, as I say, who is he's got a trial on his farm that he's currently walking through.
I'm crouched down now. This is part 1. So behind me, you should be able to see rows of oats. Now, Jack got carried away and drilled a few first time round, oversowed it with peas. So we've got a bi-crop here of peas and oats. So there's 36 metres of oats drilled here. And the reason it's 36 metres is we have a 9-metre drill and a 36-metre sprayer. So that's one strip. And next to it, as I walk further out across the field, we have the rest of the field is just peas, which is just coming through nicely. So you should be able to see You should be able to see rows of peas coming through here. I hope that's obvious.
For those who are listening, Andrew's just showing us the rows of peas. I have to say, Andrew, I think your peas with the oats looked a lot healthier than the peas on their own.
I think that would be interesting. It depends on where I show you. If I walk you across a little bit further, because you can see where they were, there's not so much debris. This was a field. So here, you see the peas look bloody marvellous, don't they?
Yep. No, that's
so be careful what you wish for. This field was X-Days wheat last year. We autocast a grazing mixture. That was one of Hutchinson's. It's Maxi Graze, which is double turnips
tillage radish, and various other things that sheep love to eat. I'll move my thumb there, that's better. So this was grazed by sheep. We got a good income out of the sheep grazing the crop, and then it was direct drilled fortnight ago today, actually. We've had to wait for everything to dry up this year. It's been a long old winter, hasn't it? So direct drilled with Sakura, which is Marifat pea, as a seed crop. It'd be really interesting. We're going to apply some Nutri-Slosh, as I called it earlier, some
Nutrition.
Growth promoter basically, and see what that looks like, and then take it to yield, because 36 meters is perfect for 3 passes of a 12-meter combine. So we'll see. Then we'll do soil mineral N tests after the crop, and to see how what the differences are, and obviously we'll take the following wheat crop next year to yield and see how the differences are. So it's very exciting. Basically, I'm expecting that we'll probably use between 40 and 60 kilos less nitrogen after the peas than after the oats. But there may be some other soil benefits from oats, because they're a very good rooting crop. Peas are obviously a shallow rooting crop, so we don't know what it's going to do. It'll be interesting to see.
No, but of course, you'll also have your area of peas with oats, so it'll be interesting to see which one.
They might not survive the oat weed control, but we have got it on a different farm. I've got a crop of boats, so that's spring oats, beans.
Right.
And it will be taken to yield to see what that's like. And I'm going to, we would have done it today, but we're going to say we had 34 mil of rain. And if that's going to be, I'm going to broadcast some white clover seed onto that as well. So it's going to be an understory of white clover through the oats and the beans if it gets going.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like a really interesting trial. Now, Andrew, the audio is failing us. The
wind has got hold of it big time.
The wind has got hold of it.
Hand over the microphone and hope that's a bit better.
But look, that's just about all we've got time for. I have to say, this is a very exciting trial. So I'm also taking part in this trial as well. We've not got anything like as exciting trial as yours. All we're doing is we've got an area of spring beans, and then we've got an area of late sown wheat. So we're doing a comparison. But we're also we're trying some Nutricia, like you are. We're also trying some Vixaran on it as well. So we'll see what effects, if any, we get from those. But look, Andrew, as I say, that's all we've got time for. But it's been a fascinating walk through your farm and your farming career. It's always exciting to do trials with you, Andrew. Your love, I think we share the same love of technology as well, especially
farming could be a really straightforward, ordinary, without much. It's the same old, same old. I always like the challenge of something new. I'm insanely inquisitive, always looking to see what's going to make life more interesting or better, how we're going to produce more with less input. And it all comes down to business growth, really. If you're not driving your business forward, what are you doing? And I want to, my stated aim is to grow old disgracefully. And in order to do that, I need a really good income stream. So, finding new ways of doing things better, more profitably, is a great way to start. And it keeps me interested.
So that's a great way to end this this podcast. Let's all grow old disgracefully.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Tom. Talk to you again.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you everyone for listening. Join us again for another episode of the Boffin Buzz. But for now, goodbye, and thank you very much. Have a good day.